Hi.
G'day. What club are you from, Jen?
The badminton club in Hobart.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we might as well make a start. As I said, it's going to be a pretty informal session tonight, so feel free to pop in and ask any questions and make any comments you want. So I really appreciate you guys joining us this afternoon. In the last couple of months, Good Sports have been having a heap of conversations with clubs right across the country, basically getting a feel for how they're going and what they're doing at the moment, and getting a bit of an understanding of some of the challenges that they're facing. So hopefully some of the stuff that we talk about tonight will sort of provide the UTAS clubs different resources and opportunities that they can take back to their own little communities. As I spoke to Keegan a little bit earlier on the phone and said, this is really only the start at the moment. It's a good little introduction, and it's a good little way to get back in touch with the UTAS clubs from a Good Sports perspective. So we're making contact with all the UTAS clubs over the next couple of months, over the next couple of weeks, and sort of sorting out a plan of attack. So as it says on the screen, my name's Hugh Graham, and I'm a Community Development Officer for the Good Sports program. I work with about 250 or so sporting clubs in southern Tassie. Really appreciate you having a bit of time tonight. I'd just like to ask Keegan to say a couple of words. No pressure on what you have to say, mate, but just a little bit of an introduction from the UTAS side of things.
Yeah, too easy. First of all, thanks, Jan, for joining us for tonight's forum, and thanks, Hugh, for doing this for us. But from the university's point of view, we see a lot of value in having a partnership with Good Sports, and there's a lot of value and importance in doing so. And we're keen for clubs like badminton for you to continue to develop and grow your relationship with Good Sports, because there is a lot of value and they do some great things and provide some really good resources for the club. So again, thanks for joining us tonight, Jan. And hopefully a few more will join on later.
Thanks, mate. So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. In Hobart down here, it's the Muinina people. I'd like to pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, as well as acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. In terms of tonight's agenda, so I'm going to be having a bit of a chat about a few different things. As I said, from the conversations I've been having, there are a couple of key topics that have come up, particularly around social media and helping with tips and resources around that, but also supporting mental health at the time. And I'll just be starting with a little bit of an introduction about the Good Sports program. So the aim is to sort of come back to your clubs with a little bit of information that can hopefully help you keep your members connected. As I said, there'll be a little bit of time at the end. If you guys have got any questions, other than that, feel free to sort of sing out throughout the webinar and shoot me any questions you don't feel comfortable asking over this sort of platform. So just as a bit of a starting point, I'll tell you a little bit about the ADF. The Alcohol and Drug Foundation is Australia's leading organisation committed to preventing harm and minimising harm caused by alcohol and other drugs. Our policies and practices are designed to sort of help build community capacity to make change, and all our programs are supported by the latest evidence and sort of aligned with the national drug strategy. So we're really committed to preventing the harms caused by alcohol and other drugs, and we think one of the best ways to do that is through sporting clubs. Why our work's important. So there's quite a few stats there on the screen, and I won't go through every single one because you guys are obviously capable of reading. But these stats show that alcohol and other drugs have a really damaging effect on Australian communities. You just have to look at some of the stats there. $8.2 billion for some of the community harms caused by illegal drugs, and particularly the alcohol. Over $15.3 billion. That's a lot of money and a lot of harms caused to communities. But some of the things that all these stats have in common is that they're all preventable. And the ADF is committed to preventing and minimising stats like these, but we need the help of communities like UTAS and the sporting clubs that go with them. So who's Good Sports? Good Sports is a program that's been working with local sporting clubs for over 2 decades, helping to inspire them to become their best, which is why we're Australia's largest and longest running health initiative in community sport. Our program works through 3 levels, and it's sort of based around taking each step through a cultural sort of cultural step, and it's sort of built to help inspire community long-term change and help clubs do things like responsible alcohol management, safe transport, and doing things like promoting smoke-free environments. We also offer different programs based around things like mental health and healthy eating. Also working with clubs that have junior club members, so a junior program as well, and also a separate program which is based around tackling illegal drugs. The program is free and it's designed for busy volunteers, so we really appreciate people like yourselves who put their hand up for the love of the club rather than doing it for something like financial gain. And it's designed so that myself in the south and Shay, who works up north, can help the clubs step by step and with anything they need. As a bit of a snapshot for Good Sports in Tasmania, we've got just under 500 clubs in the country, in Tasmania, which we think is give or take about 2/3 of all the sporting clubs in Tasmania. And in Tassie itself, we've got 5 programs available, unlike the rest of the country who have 4 programs. Across the country, we've got just under 10,000 clubs, which we think is roughly about half of all the sporting clubs in the country. So we've got a really massive reach right across Australia. We work with sporting clubs from all codes and all different sorts of walks of life. So we've got a lot of experience in working with different clubs around the country. There are a whole heap of benefits for joining Good Sports. And according to some of the clubs that we've asked, they've said, Good Sports help make their club more family friendly. It helps give the club a better profile when applying for grants, helps new members come on board. And our website has got a little search function where people new to a certain community can search for different Good Sports clubs in that community. And we also do things like help clubs work through tricky paperwork of things like policies and that sort of thing. This research on the next slide shows that Good Sports program really does work. We did a randomised control trial that found that Good Sports clubs had experienced a 42% decrease in alcohol-related incidents and a 37% decrease in risky drinking as well. So it just really goes to show that even from an independent sort of trial, what we do works, and we really do help reduce these sorts of these harms. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, Good Sports is broken up into 5 separate programs. The alcohol program is based around helping prevent clubs becoming associated with harms that are associated with alcohol, whilst also addressing things like safe transport and working to smoke-free environments. The healthy eating program is based around helping clubs to give them tools and resources to promote healthy eating. Particularly for those clubs that have canteens. We do things like working with them to assess their canteen menu, looking at sort of ways we can have healthier fundraising, and just trying to make a healthier, nutritious club on the whole. Our Healthy Minds program is actually specific to Tasmania, and there's been a lot of interest in the last couple of months right across the country in some of the work that we do, but it's basically helping clubs become better equipped to help the mental wellness of their members through things like promoting help-seeking materials, reducing stigma, promoting good general mental health, and encouraging open and inclusive conversations around mental health. The Tackling Illegal Drugs program basically helps clubs become better prepared for if there were to be a drug-related issue through things like we've got online training modules and policies as well. I think it's important to know something like a policy in this case is more around preparation and prevention rather than, we're saying, you might have a drug issue. It's sort of helping you deal with it if there were to be one. And finally, our junior program sort of helps clubs with the tools and resources to promote the right attitudes towards, all the things that we've just spoken about, particularly given that, young people sort of are a bit of a sponge and they take up everything they see. So helping set the standard really early and promoting to young members the right sort of role modelling behaviours. So how do we work with Good Sports clubs? At the moment, we're in a bit of a limited capacity. Recently, I've been doing a lot of phone calls and Zoom meetings with clubs, but typically outside of the COVID-related issues. There's a whole heap of things we do, including going out to club meetings, going through some of the things that we've just talked about with committees and seeing where they'd like to work on their club. helping to review and implement policies, and providing a whole heap of electronic resources, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So we asked some clubs to describe the program, and here's a quick little snapshot of what they had to say.
The role that the club plays in the community is it gives an opportunity for children to not only play sport, but they get to mix socially with other people. They get to learn life values, and I think it brings the community together. The wings just spread and it just keeps going. Yeah, so it's a domino effect.
Crazy. So that's a bit of an overview. Oh, yeah, still playing. No, that's all good. That's a bit of an overview of Good Sports. Now I'm going to, as I said, have a little bit of a chat about social media and helping your club being marketed online. So I'll sort of get into that. So social media and why we use it. I would imagine, all clubs involved with UTAS have some sort of social media to sort of help get the name out. It's a pretty common sense thing nowadays, and it just sort of helps you, promote what you're doing, sharing updates, facilitate conversations, and engage with your members in the community. So it's a really awesome tool for local sporting clubs to have, and it's a really good way to communicate directly with your members. In terms of getting started, there's a few different things for clubs to think about. So firstly, in terms of managing your page, you've got to think about who's going to manage it and in what sort of capacity. Typically, it's sort of handy to have one or two people be the main sort of admins for something like a Facebook or an Instagram page, just to keep a bit of consistency and to have a bit of knowledge of what's going on at the time. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of work, but dedicating half an hour or so here or there every day or so can really go a long way in terms of starting a really good page. Think about the updates that your club's going to share. So there are a whole heap of different things that clubs can post. And again, I'll touch on this a little bit later, but having thought about what you're going to share and who you're going to share it to. Some of the examples are things like, posting flashbacks, posting things like what you're working on behind the scenes, exercise tips in isolation, little skills that coaches are sharing and that sort of thing. When we're talking about sort of what language and tone you're going to use in your photos, it's sort of important to understand that this is an extension of your club. And you've got to think about, how do you want people to see your club from an unbiased point of view? So clubs should consider what they want to be, or how they want to be represented in the community. And sometimes the language and tone goes a long way in that. In terms of format you'll use, so think about things like photos, videos, links. There's a few different ways that clubs can approach this. I think the generic way to go about it is for clubs to have some sort of Facebook page. That's usually the most common way. And that's a really good way to share, general information and basically anything you want. Things like, Instagram is also a really good option for clubs who are posting a lot of photos or videos. And, something like maybe Twitter might be something that clubs look at if they're posting a lot of short, sharp tweets about information. On the next slide, we've got a little bit of a rubric sort of table there that talks about planning your posts. And it's also quite important to plan your posts as well. I think it's definitely something that people should consider. It sort of saves them 20 or 30 minutes sometimes if they plan out what they're going to post in advance. If you sit down and you think, okay, I've got a couple of different social media platforms, what do I want to post and when, you can sort of lay out your week if you've got that sort of time and commitment, and it just makes life a lot easier. I might just have a really quick break there and just ask if you guys had any questions thus far around any of it.
Apologies about those video issues before. The joys of technology.
No, we can send that. We can send a video out if people are interested in the email I'll send through tomorrow. Also, I'll keep going. So one of the things that we've thought about in terms of helping clubs plan their social media is that we've actually developed a social media toolkit. We acknowledge right now that because of COVID, communities are under a really big strain, and there is definitely a potential consequence for an increase in harms associated with alcohol and drug use. A couple of the things within our toolkit here sort of touch on, spot your drinking, things like Australian guidelines for safer drinking. Nothing that's sort of over the top, but something that's really good and really easy to inform members, and something that can be shared really easily too. So the promotional toolkit sort of provides you with social media resources that can be shared with local community members. And it just, it helps them stay safe and connected with you. So in terms of things that your club can post, again, it sort of varies from club to club and what sort of things you want to post, but some of the really popular things over the last couple of months have been video coaching drills. I suppose badminton might be a little bit of a hard one if you can't really play opposite someone, but something like soccer or footy, for example, can be quite an easy one where coaches can post a drill of them doing a certain skill. Might be practicing on your left hand, might be practicing on your right hand, but this is something that sort of engages the community members. So other things include online challenges and encouraging your members to engage with what you're posting. Polls and questions are really good to engage with community feedback and get a feel for what the people that are following your page and what they think. Some clubs do member profiles or get to know me posts, which I think are really popular for some of the people that like getting their face out there. And doing things like online tournaments, particularly FIFA for those of you that play it, are quite popular too. So just any way that you can sort of engage with your members is better than not engaging with them really. One of the final ones there is having online video catch-up. So things like having Zoom meetings and Skype meetings with your players has been really popular in the last couple of months because it's a way for them to engage without breaking the social distancing rules. When we talk about sort of growing your community, I think at the end of the day, there's no point in having your social media if no one knows about it. So one of the things that we really encourage clubs to do, at least initially, is to get people to start liking or following their page. At the end of the day, that's why you have a social media, so that people can know what you're up to. So yeah, really look at promoting it. Doing things like sharing your content regularly is a really good way to keep your members engaged. I don't think people are going to want to like or following a page that doesn't post anything. So we're not saying post all the time, but sort of have a chat to your members and you can get a bit of a feel for how often they want to see things. Some clubs post things weekly, some clubs post things every day. It sort of varies club to club and community to community, but starting conversations online is the way to help grow it too. Got a little tip there in the corner that the most popular times to use social media are the evening and first thing in the morning. I think particularly the evening, when people are coming home from work or school or whatever they're doing during the day, they've got a bit of a tendency to jump on Facebook or Instagram and have a bit of a scroll through. And, if you can get your page out there and get people seeing what you're doing, that's all the best for it. So there's a little couple of examples here in terms of what other clubs are sharing. South Hobart Football Club down here had a catch-up with all their junior players over Zoom. They had a team-by-team meeting. And as I said earlier, I think it's something the young guys really enjoyed because it was a chance to catch up with their friends and have a chat and have a bit of a laugh with them without having to get all of them in a room at a time when they can't really be together. Redpath Football Club up north had a bit of a photo challenge. So they encouraged players to sort of share photos and videos of themselves in some sort of reference to the club, even doing things like practicing their footy skills at home. And that was a really good way to start a bit of a conversation, a bit of a throwback for a lot of the guys that hadn't seen each other for a while but missed the footy club and missed talking to each other. And finally, Canterbury Hockey Club on the ends recently introduced a mental health and wellbeing committee. They posted the details, a couple of their mental health and wellbeing officers, and I think that really goes a long way to showing that they're really taking mental health at the time seriously. And it's sort of demonstrating to the club that, we're here at this time. We've got people who are at the club who you can talk to if you need to. What not to post? So this is always a bit of a tricky one because, at the end of the day, we can't tell you what not to post. But there are definitely some sort of, examples of things that we sort of would recommend not to post. And that's not necessarily coming from a good sports angle. That's coming from a common sense angle. So, as it says there, your club social media is your brand. And you've really got to be thinking about what other people are seeing if they're new to the club, not necessarily if they're just members. So, having members doing things like drinking competitions or videos of them sculling beer, probably not the best example to set if you're a a smaller club looking to grow their members. The other thing to think about, too, is humour is really great. And memes are a brilliant way to have a bit of a laugh, but also have a consideration about what might necessarily be inappropriate or offensive, because there's nothing worse than coming from a good place and upsetting half your membership. So just think that at the end of the day, if you're doing things like applying for grants or sponsorship, you might have sponsors or the grants people having a look on your social media, getting a bit of a feel for who you are. And you really want to be setting a good example for not just your members, but also the people outside your community. So that's an overall summary on social media. I'll be sending out an email tomorrow morning, basically told that the UTAS sports clubs, just with a copy of the social media toolkit that they can use. And again, I'm more than happy to have a chat about that to those that are interested. So I'd like to have a bit of a chat now about mental health and sporting clubs. In particular, what mental health is, how you can promote good help seeking, some social media posts, a few different resources, and where you can turn to get a bit of support as well. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, the team in Tassie are the only team in the country that deliver the Healthy Minds program. And this is a really good start for that. So the next few slides will provide a bit of an introduction to the Healthy Minds program, and it's something that I can talk about more with the clubs individually. I'd like to sort of preface it by saying, I'm not a mental health expert or practitioner. However, a lot of the information in the Healthy Minds program was developed by Healthy Minds professionals, also by mental health professionals who know what they're talking about. So just starting with a bit of a definition there, and it's pretty easy to read off the slide. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual can cope with the normal stresses of life. Every individual can also realise his or her own potential, work productively or fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Obviously, right now with all the stresses that are going on in the world, things are changing, and there's definitely a sort of a period of uncertainty. The ABC recently did a study that found that the number of Australians reporting poor mental health has more than doubled compared to a few months ago. The people reporting a feeling of despair has more than tripled, and the people reporting feelings of confusion is up more than 5 times. So I think given current circumstances, that probably goes a long way in sort of describing a bit of a context of where we're at now. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of your members are going to be in despair or confused, but definitely it's something that is up in the community, and it's something to think about as well. So promoting help seeking. There are things that clubs can do right now to support the mental health of their members and promote help seeking behaviours. Much of this can be done through social media, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, the earlier people are on social media, the better, because more people are online now than ever, and it's next time for clubs to be promoting help seeking online as well. Good Sports partner with an organisation called Speak Up Stay Chatty, and they're a Tasmanian organisation who work closely with sporting clubs and schools and workplaces as well to support mental health. Together we've developed a number of resources for mental health, and we're going to be providing them to you as well. So we'll share with you these now, and we'll also send them out to you after the forum. So one of the social media posts we've got here is centred around self-care. So these are easily shareable. They're a little bit of a text piece there, followed by a little graphic. And there's a few different ones that are available to be shared on social media. I won't go through it in too great a detail, but they're a nice little way to think about supporting people's mental health without necessarily saying it in those words. Some of them include, it says there, self-care. There are other ones including, being kind, being your best, and also listening as well. So it's just giving people a little bit of information that, isn't necessarily shoving mental health down their throat. It's just reminding themselves to, they can do little bits and pieces throughout their day. Up next are a couple of posters that we'll also be sending out to clubs. And our conversations poster can be used as a guide, as a sort of a tool guide on the right there to help with general mental health conversations. What's really great about this resource is that it can be used with anyone and not just the members of the clubs. So it's a little bit hard to read there, but we'll send that out in a bit of an A3 size, so it's nice and big for people to post anywhere. But it basically breaks down the key components of a conversation. So it starts with the idea of asking. So, starting the conversation, giving the person a chance to open up and let them be honest. Something like if you say to them, I've noticed you've been not really yourself lately, which will sort of, highlight to the people that you care. The next step is to understand. So doing things like asking open-ended questions and letting them really talk about what's going on and getting a good understanding. So I'm sure everyone's been in a situation where they've had a conversation with someone and they felt like they might not really be understood. If you are having these sorts of conversations, it's important that you remind the person that you do understand. You might not necessarily be in the exact same position or understand fully, but you can appreciate where they're coming from. The next step is to refer. So we don't expect anyone to be a mental health expert. The best thing you can do if you're doing something like this is to be able to refer them on to find additional support. So it's all about connecting them with relevant services and experts, and I'll touch on them shortly. But yeah, we don't expect someone having a mental health conversation to be able to diagnose a mental health condition or to be able to treat them. The best thing that they can do is they understand, okay, this is the next step. And finally, the last little bit there is to check in. So it's a bit of a follow-up and a bit of a touch base at the end of that conversation, just to get a bit of a feel for how they're travelling afterwards. It could be the next couple of days that you ask in terms of how they're travelling. Could be a couple of weeks later, but just checking in after you've had that initial conversation. There are a heap of different places to go to for support. So I've chucked a couple up there on the screen. Drug Info is a confidential and non-judgmental sort of program, and that's actually a service of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. They're available through telephone and email, and they're a referral service as well. So if they don't have the information that you're after, they have probably the widest range of resources that they can pass you on and help you get the information you're after. The other ones there are all pretty common for people who are interested in getting help. Beyond Blue is obviously a really big one, and they do heaps of different work in the community. I think they've got a coronavirus and mental health wellbeing service at the moment as well, and that's sort of specified around current events. Lifeline are a really big one, and most people know about Lifeline. They're a 24-hour service for crisis support and suicide prevention. Men's Line's there as well, and they're basically a dedicated free help support referrals and counselling for men. And Headspace is there also. So there's, these are just the start of a number of different resources that people can go to for help. We've got a little graphic there in the corner, which our colleague Shay found recently, and that's from the Beyond Blue website. And it says, remember to reach out to friends and colleagues who get it. You don't have to face these feelings alone. So right now, I think it's really important time to stay connected to your members, even if you can't necessarily see them. If you know of club members that are living alone, reach out to them, and whether that be through social media, you send them an email, a text, have a phone call. If you know someone that might be struggling, shoot them a message and just reach out. Particularly if you know members that are practicing strict isolation rules due to being at high risk, whether that be for people that have low immunity, if they're from a cold community or an older aged background, if they're social distancing, they're a really great sort of demographic to reach out to as well, because often they're the people that might be struggling the most. And really, it's important to promote your members the importance of connecting with each other and reaching out. So we're not saying that you as a president or as a committee of a club have to be the ones to do it. Get online, encourage your members to stay connected with each other, and you'll create a really good environment that everyone wants to be part of. And just finally, I'll touch quickly on a couple of the online modules that we have for clubs. They're based around the Tackling Illegal Drugs program and another one around alcohol management. So our alcohol management one is sort of as it says there on the screen. It goes for around 15 minutes or so, and it helps clubs manage alcohol consumption doing things like teaching clubs about the risks associated with alcohol consumption and also certain ways around managing intoxicated people. I think it's also probably important to note that just because your club doesn't have a liquor licence, it doesn't mean you might not have a relationship with alcohol. A lot of clubs, for example, netball clubs or hockey clubs don't have a liquor licence, but they might have an end of season function. I think something like the alcohol management module is a really good way for club committees when they're planning something like an end of season function to sort of have a look at and say, okay, we don't have the liquor licence, but this might be a really good idea in future if there's going to be alcohol around the club, doing things like having food available, having water available, encouraging people to sort responsible ways to get home, covers all that sort of thing. The next module is around tackling illegal drugs, and that goes through a few different circumstances of things like, what to do if there's a drug incident at your club. It goes through the different examples of clubs that club members may encounter, and also the effects of drugs on the brain and body. So as I said, they're go for about 15 minutes or so, really informative, and they're also a tool that's club committees really find quite handy as well. So where to from here? I'm really keen on organising a meeting with all of the UTAS clubs in some capacity, sort of one-on-one in the next couple of weeks. There's a whole heap of different things that we can do, including reviewing club social media approaches, helping your club to pass on help-seeking materials to your members, even reviewing some of the online modules that you're interested in. I think particularly now more than ever, as clubs are slowly starting to come out of the stage where they've been socially isolating and their members are getting back together, it's probably a good time for the clubs that are still getting together to do all the paperwork and that sort of thing. So you can get that out of the way, and then you can really focus on the on-field sort of sporting component. So thanks for your time today. As I said, I work in the southern part of the state, so I think there's I think the majority of the UTAS clubs down here in the south. But for those that listen back to this, Shay Collis works in the north of the state. She's absolutely fantastic, and we're available 9 to 5 Monday to Friday for the most part. If you've got any questions around any of this stuff, feel free to sing out or send us a message. Are there any questions from you guys listening in at the moment?
No questions, Hugh.
Beautiful.
Keegan and Jan, my name's Steph. I work with Hugh as part of the Good Sports team in Tassie. I was just curious, Jan, if you don't mind me asking, are members within your badminton club staying connected throughout this time?
We have not been really active on social media since since the government had forced everyone to shut down, really. So we have not been that connected, which is not ideal, honestly.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it might be that your club is a really good club for communicating just within your members. So social media might not be a really big thing for your club, but just reminding your members, hey, keep in touch with each other, whether that be on social media or, as I said before, shooting each other a message privately. I think it goes a long way to remind them that the sporting club also cares about them as well.
Yes, we do work not closely, but we have a lot of overlap with members as well as members of the Southern Tassie Badminton Association, and they've been quite active on that page. So I think people have been connected. Yeah.
I think the other things too is to think about whether or not the association or the governing body, like the STBA, I think with you, Jan, they've probably got resources that they can send to clubs as well. So if you're not necessarily sure of what to post or you've got any questions, you could always ask someone like someone from the UTAS side of things, or someone from a higher association that governs your sport as well. Cool. Well, thanks again for joining in tonight, guys. Appreciate your time and sitting through and giving up your Thursday night. And I'll shoot this email out to you guys in the morning with a bit more information.
Thanks.